Hi everyone, I'm Airier. Today we're going to be checking out the second half of Lucky 1313 from a fan with too much time, Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40K. We have a Krieger that won't die. I'm sorry, just the entire concept of this is literally just sugar and hilarious to me. It's hilarious sugar. It's basically the equivalent of Laffy Taffy if Laffy Taffy was actually good. I know what I said, I'm standing by that. So we're just going to jump right in and see what happens with the guy who I'm really hoping doesn't die by the end of the story, because I want him to become a recurring character. Just because I think it's funny that a Krieger would be good at surviving. I find this funny. I mean, I know it has to happen because they don't make people generals immediately. They have to at least come from somewhere. That said, it's just funny to me, and I want to see more of that. Yeah, I know, this is a story that's not funny, but this is hilarious. I don't care if it's the most dark and gritty thing. It's because of who it is that it becomes just very humorous, and that's great. It's situational comedy, and I love this situation. So we're going to jump right in and see where this goes. Hopefully, a long and prosperous life despite himself. You guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. Fan did a great work. I really want to see what happens next. And when you're done, if you like this, subscribe and let me know if there's anything I missed, because, yeah, let's get started.
Without speaking, the Krieger's eyes followed the path from whence the soldiers had come, seeing other small squads flanking and ambushing the Republic's positions, though the clones were already reacting en masse to the new threat. 1313's sight led him to the skeletal ruin of the second bridge, and there his hidden eyes widened as he saw what was left of the Cadian assault, crossing over the exposed beams and struts of the unguarded
I'm sorry. I thought the funniest part here would be a Krieger living despite himself. No, apparently it's Krieg. Someone from Krieg who literally just charged into gunfire, having a what the fuck moment at Cadians. Doing like, okay, wow. Just that's... Oh, sorry. It's a different kind of absolute insanity. And just seeing it reflected in Krieg is absolutely hilarious. This is, you don't expect that, and then things like this drop, and it's just, oh, I'm already enjoying this.
Devastated avenue. Rifles and weapons held up over their heads or borne on their backs. The Cadians tiptoed in tenuous lines, walking like ants as they balanced and marched over the narrow crossings afforded to them. Some clones began to fire in their direction, but the only ones exposed now were the tail end of the survivors, and those who had made the journey already quickly honed in on the offending clones, providing cover for their kinsmen. 1313 felt elation and pain flood into him in near equal portions, and he staggered, almost dropping his weapon as he caught himself on the wooden barricades the clones had hastily constructed. Bit by bit, the pain in his body was winning out, filling him up and driving out even the chance to feel or think anything else. The Krieger suddenly felt a swelling nausea fill him near to bursting, and dropped the pistol, his one good hand working at the seals of his mask.
Now this is actually interesting, because I'm pretty sure what they're describing is essentially coming down from a massive rush. Basically, painkillers are, well, they're drugs. And when you do a lot of them, because you'd assume you're not going to live, usually its side effects are ignored because you're not going to live to feel them. He lived, and now he's basically going through instantaneous drop downs. Withdrawal would be nicer. That would imply it's going down. This is just a cliff he fell off. Yeah.
He managed to yank the whole thing off his face mere seconds before he threw up his morning starch rations and protein, groaning as his legs threatened to collapse beneath him.
Oh,
the cold rain fell on his face, washing away his sweat and the sick that had spilled over his chin and lips. He felt someone tugging at him roughly, jarring him as he was forced down onto the logs, made to sit as many hands grabbed him from several places. He tried to resist, his vision blurry and filling with red, but his one good arm had been restrained, and he had not the strength in his legs to kick very hard.
Definitely ally.
Something sharp jammed into his neck, at the base of his shoulder, and once more the pain receded, though the warmth of his standard combat stims did not return. Instead, a cold, icy sensation spread from the spot, making him shiver, but bringing his dazed mind to sharp, killing focus.
Oh. You know what? There's always so many different types of las gun drawings. This one looks different than the usual ones I see. Mostly because it's more like a lasgun rifle. A las rifle? Because usually the guns are more compact. They don't have the extensions there. I like that they have the undersung bayonet. It looks slightly different. Not a lot different, just slightly different. Just cool art. Good choice by fan.
Focus. He relaxed, recognizing that the many arms which held him were the myriad mechadendrites of a red-robed tech priest who, even now, was fussing and cutting at the greatcoat sleeve around his ruined arm. As the spider-like form of the machine god's chosen tugged and worked on him like a frenzied mechanic, an armored Cadian approached, addressing the tech priest as she continued her work. Any advice, Magos? We caught them off guard, but they are adapting pretty quick.
Yeah,
and they still outnumber our surviving forces, but... The man started to say,
by a factor of 3.26, enemy has displayed tendencies towards unified adaptation and organization. Maximum deployable force is currently projected to succeed in only 12.1%.
Okay, this... Goddamn, fan, that is a great usage of... I'm assuming it's not even a filter, but getting an audio recording read through a generation program. It's slightly female, but it's very much a mechanical design. But that is such a perfect usage of the voice right now that it actually works better this way. Huh. I didn't think about using that, and now he did it. It's like, oh no, this makes perfect sense. Huh. Usually just do a second reverb tone to make it sound tinny. And no, this is just flat out. I can't speak today. Flat out. There's the word. More robotic, and it fits perfectly. Sorry, I like little things like that just add to the similarity. Not similarity. Simulacra? No, that's a different word. Verisimilitude. There we go. I knew someone is in it somewhere. Yep. How real something feels. And it fits well. Good choice.
Of simulated battlefield outcomes, variables are not sufficiently influential or
almost sounds like a German
beneficial
filter
to
saying
provide
English
an
language.
acceptable margin for victory. Processing solution. Processing.
the tech priest said, her voice clearly synthesized, though thickly accented in the way of the throne world and its red sister.
Wait, that didn't sound British. That's not Germanic. I mean, it's pretty close, but... Huh. I didn't... You know, I guess it would make sense if there is a homeworld and Mars, because they're so close, accent. Really? Yeah, sure, why not?
The Cadian shrugged and looked back at his men before looking back at her. Care to say any of that in God? He began to say.
Processing.
She replied, cutting him off as she continued her callous fleshcraft on.
No, I actually missed what she said.
Cutting him off as she continued her callous fleshcraft on 1313.
Okay.
Steel wires
Processing
spooled
him.
out from several of her mechanical arms as syringes and daubs dripping with bitter chemicals darted towards and away from his trembling skin, finding breaches, burns, and all else.
I mean, it
in
works,
short
but
order.
goddamn, man, this is
Thanks to the
freaking body
anesthetic
horror,
she
the
had
entire
applied to
faction.
him, the corpsman could mostly only feel pressure and vague stinging. It was nothing like the pain which
Good art,
had been
too.
blaring within him before, and he found it easy to hold still, though he did look away from whatever it was she was doing to him. A small flock of servo skulls spun and hovered around them, at least 12 in total, all seeming to orient around the tech
12
priest
servo
herself,
skulls?
like paper lamps circling a cyclone.
Is she controlling all of them?
Solution deduced. Depriving enemy forces of coordination capacity is the most efficient way to upset current statistics.
Maybe it's Russian.
She said. One of her long mechanical arms stretched and snapped out, snatching a floating servo skull out of the air like a toad's tongue catching a fly. Her limbs began working on it right away, flipping the squirming skull over and exposing the mechanical components which had been crammed into the vacancies within the human bone. She began to frenzy over the squirming skull in much the same way she was over the Krieger, limbs working with inhuman coordination as
Is she
casings
salvaging
were
it for parts
unscrewed,
to use on
components
him?
moved and replaced, and new additions applied. As she did both this and her medical work, she continued speaking.
The next objective is to take the arms and interface him with one of the energy cells that the enemy are using to power their repeating weapons. My predictive models estimate a 72.8% chance that those energy cells will suffice for our purpose.
Okay, so I'm actually probably just going to turn this on for when she's talking because it is hard to understand her a little just because between the accent and the synthesization. I do like the effect, but it is a little harder. That said, I'm pretty sure she just said they're going to jury-rig an alien power source. Okay, she is a radical Magos. That is, I mean, if the clones didn't look human, this is probably well in the lines of this person could easily be shot and or Call. So help me if this turns out to be an offshoot of Call somewhere just possessing another body. Because let's be honest, it's not even the first time he's done that. I mean, usually he didn't have a body at the time, but would you be surprised if he was just running backup bodies somewhere that didn't look anything like him? You know, it's a joke at the same time. It's also completely true, and I can actually see that happening in canon. Goddamn Call. Still,
the Cadian nodded.
Kind
and
of
to his men,
power source you don't know?
signaling that they would be moving out very soon.
No, I mean, that's all their power
They
sources.
closed in as he began to speak. What will Tenny Harmus do once we plug him in? He asked. The tech priest seemed to finish her work on the servo skull then, taking it and placing it into the captain's hands, the skull's eye lenses and small grapple claws still moving and clamping the air, but its hovering capabilities having been apparently disabled from whatever alterations had been done to it. Its name, Tenny Harmus, was emblazoned onto a golden plate on its forehead.
Oh.
We will release a multi-frequency broadcast pulse and will continue to do so for as long as power is maintained
Why?
and fed into him. This should bring down their comnet and thereby impair their organizational and adaptational capacities by 88.8%.
So on the fly, on the battlefield, while it's still within firing distance, she just jury-rigged essentially a jammer using technology she's never actually engaged with before. You know, if you want an example of the Mechanicus, or yeah, the Mechanicus going absolutely crazy and being competent, that is incredibly competent. Everything that she just did, apparently, I thought it was just a battlefield like suture to clamp for him, but no, it's even crazier. She's doing something drastically important that will hurt the clones because of how their organization works. And she literally did it with spare parts and an extra battery from an enemy's device that she doesn't even know anything about. That is an insane level of technological proficiency. And usually not how they're shown, just because in a lot of media, including canon, Magoses are doing great things that they have no idea about. They just know these parts work. It's the Chinese box option. Basically, input comes in, output goes out. What happens in the middle? It just gets through. It's a horrible explanation of that concept, and honestly, I can't stand it, but it's, you know, something come in, something come out, you don't know how, it just does. Here, though, this is someone who knows exactly what they're doing, and because they're willing to use an enemy's power cell, this is definitely someone I want to follow more, just because that is not something you see. This is creativity done on the fly, with something she just shouldn't know. It's actually crazy that she's still alive and hasn't been mind-wiped, because that's way too tech heresy for some people.
She said. Right, then we'll get moving to it. The captain confirmed, tucking the skull under his arm and drawing his pistol.
Wait.
She added. With one more harsh tug to his wounded arm, she stood away from 1313, her mechadendrites lifting him back up to a standing position.
And she was doing all that
He
while
looked
still working
himself
on him.
over, amber eyes widening on his exposed face. The tech priest had amputated his left arm, an act he somehow hadn't felt in any distinct way.
He still had an arm to
Where
amputate?
before had hung the burnt ruin of his formerly functional
Oh, it was just
limb,
destroyed,
now
not gone,
all that
okay.
remained was little more than a hand span out from his shoulder.
Yeah.
The sleeve of his greatcoat sewn shut over the stump, hiding the dressing and the flesh it swaddled. The burns and other injuries he had taken had also been located, treated, and bandaged, his uniform having been torn open in the affected areas and then restitched closed once her work had been completed.
Take him with you. He is a member of the Dead Corps, and has succeeded in fighting his way to the back of the line. If nothing else, he will serve as another body to distract from your own.
She said. The captain
I mean,
snapped his
yeah,
eyes
that's what
from
Krieg does.
her to the unmasked face of 1313, instantly stunned by what he saw. His jaw tightened, and he strode towards him, bending down to pick up the gun 1313 had dropped earlier, looking at it and the words written on it, and then at the soldier before him. How old are you, Krieger? The man said.
Please be more than
Though
5.
the statement was grammatically a question, it was spoken as an order, and 1313 snapped a salute with his one good arm as he answered. 15 solar years, sir.
Gonna be honest, that's actually more than I thought. I was really hoping they would just do that. Also, in a previous after session, I guess you call it, author talk, actually in the previous episode, Fen did mention that he's more or less using the Vitae womb as a cloning chamber. So the Kriegers are basically clones. And yeah, that honestly makes perfect sense. It might be different in other places. This is how Fan's treating because of the things he said in that one. Or at least how he believes it works so far. So yeah. Little kid with a gun.
He said to
Makes
the
sense, though.
Cadian.
Technically
The
still
man
probably older
nodded
than the clones.
grimly, looking back down at the gun one more time. Are you well enough to fight and not slow us down? He asked. 1313 gave a sharp, decisive nod of his head, holding his salute, blinking the crisp, freezing rain out of his eyes. The man before him nodded once more and flipped the gun in his hand so that the barrel was held between his fingers and the handle aimed towards the Krieger. Then take this and follow me, he said. 1313 broke his salute, taking the gun from his temporary superior and saluting once more. The captain said no more, turning to his men with a whistle and waving them forward as he pulled out a pair of small binoculars and began scanning for the nearest emplacement. While he did this, the tech priest used her many arms to take 1313's mask, wrapping it back around his face and securing it tightly while simultaneously taking the half-spent hotshot power pack out of his gun and replacing it with a fresh one.
Did you add one?
She spoke not at all as she did this, the many red lenses of her eyes making it unclear if the tech priest was even looking at the corpsman as she finished and turned away. Beginning to move towards another wounded soldier, a Cadian who had taken a shot to the gut and was huffing and cursing behind the others.
Yep.
1313 hesitated for a moment, but spoke.
Thank you.
The Krieger said to her, not yelling
mask
through the
effect on.
rain, but voicing the words nonetheless. She slowed ever so briefly, one of her arms performing a reverse salute in his direction, though she did not turn and
that
did
look
not
like?
stop. It was more than he had expected, and he added nothing to it as he turned to wait for the captain's orders.
Really wish they mentioned her name.
He did not have to
She's
wait
definitely
for very
interesting.
long. The captain was just a little taller than he himself was, with dark skin and pale purple eyes. He kept his hair close to the skull, something which was apparent as the man did not wear a helmet. On the back of his head was tattooed the double-headed eagle of the Imperial Aquila, barely visible against his black skin and the fuzz of his equally black hair. All right, I've got our target. Stay close and keep your heads down. We are going to follow this line of stacked trees until we are right behind that position over there.
Where are they going for?
He said, indicating towards their target with an outstretched finger. Once there,
Oh, the
we're
initial
going
target.
to rush 'em.
A firing
Stow the
platform.
grenades. We can't use explosives or we'll risk damaging the energy cells. Same goes for flamers. Stow 'em. The captain ordered.
Wait. If they're trying not to damage something, does that mean they're trying to capture something? Are they trying to turn the weapons of the enemy against the enemy? Oh. I mean, I could be misreading it, but that's... You know, I was just going to attribute this to the fact that clones are looking human enough that they're willing to do that. Because if they didn't look human and they were doing this, this is, yeah. Really radical. I mean, it's been done, but usually also by Blood Ravens before, well, Blood Raven things happen.
3 of his squad groaned, slinging 2 grenade launchers and 1 flamer, and drawing combat
Flamers are fun,
knives
though.
and sidearms. All right, stay low, stay light, and stay on my trail. Let's go, he said, and took off, crouching as he went. The squad followed after, the mist and the rain as well as the stacked logs helping to conceal them as they moved up on the first group of clones, who were, themselves, hiding behind wooden barriers, watching to make sure no one snuck up behind the emplacement.
Oh?
But whereas their white and yellow armor practically made them glow among the contrast of the darker trees, the tan and green uniforms of the Cadians and the dark coat of the Krieger with them allowed them to remain inconspicuous as they maneuvered. The squad swung out wide, coming in behind the clones and destroying them in short order. Now in position to charge the emplacement from behind, they had a better idea of what they would be charging into. The firing emplacements were half-domed shells with enough open space in front to allow their repeating blaster free range of targeting. The rear was mostly open and vulnerable, but provided just enough cover to hide behind. The clones inside would be able to hold the position, potentially for long enough for others of their kind to take notice. "We got good cover from here," said a corporal. The woman in question was holding a long las rifle, one of the long shot variety, and was using the scope on the weapon to...
Long shot? Oh! Sorry, I'm used to hot shots and regular ones, but I guess this is one that's more in lore rather than the game mechanics itself. I haven't really paid much for the Krieg, or, well, any guards, so can't really say I know too much about that. Specific weapons.
Scout out the entrance. The captain beside her nodded, but said nothing for a moment as he examined the position. While the corporal was on the captain's right, 1313 came up on his left, with all three of them kneeling behind the trees as they peered between the branches, the rest of the squad kneeling or squatting in the thickening mud behind them. "We could take them from here, probably lose less men," she went on. Again the captain nodded, but frowned, clearly not a fan of the idea despite its merit. "Maybe. But they may have time to call for help in that case, or worse, sabotage the cells. If we do this, we need to do this fast, and... Hey, Krieger, what are you doing?" the captain said, but 1313 was already up and moving. It was hard for him to move around without his left arm.
Of course, he's just going to walk towards the enemy.
Balance off something terrible, forcing him to lean oddly and walk sideways as he quickly crept up on the position. The firing of the repeater and the falling of the rain were more than enough to block the sound of his approach, and soon he was huddled by the wall, peeking over the edge. They were crammed in there, most of them shooting out through the wide window, moving around the repeater as it swiveled, all of them helping by supporting their men in the first barricade. 1313 wasn't much for planning, but he knew he had to at least a chance lasting long enough for his distraction to do more than draw attention to the entrance the captain and the Cadians would be using after him. Seeing one clone pull away to reload his long rifle, he moved in, sliding and running right up to the soldier. The clone looked up.
Dear God, I thought he was just gonna, like, get in a good position behind them, right next to them. No, he's literally running and doing a point-blank range? Goddamn insane Kriegers, man.
Up and was stunned by the sudden appearance of an enemy less than 3 steps from him, and snapped his rifle up to fire,
which he isn't loading,
time for only one shot before 1313 was inside the reach of his long barrel. The shot struck the thick plates on 1313's right shoulder, shattering them, but failing to stop the Krieger as 1313 sent a shot through the clone's right leg. The man cried out in his alien language, and the other clones halted and snapped around, quickly becoming aware of the intruder. The corpsman moved with as much speed as he could, looping around behind the clone he had wounded, pulling them both against the wall near the window, and jamming his gun up under the clone's helmet. The Republic soldier collapsed against him, and he fell as well, his only benefits being that the trooper's armored body covered most of his own, and that his lasgun was still firmly pressed against the man's chin.
Twice now he's been covered in dead people.
The clones hesitated and then didn't shoot. 1313 blinked. He was sure they would both be blasted to pieces after the clones realized he had dared to take a hostage. One of them yelled at the Krieger, but of course 1313 had not been taught how to speak almost any of their language and had not been equipped with an auto-trans. He had learned a few words, however, to aid in his duties on the planet prior to the counter-invasion. He had not used them once since arriving, but was glad he could use them now.
That's actually really intelligent.
Bathroom. 1313 said in Galactic Basic, his accent thick, nearly incomprehensible. Though he could not see their faces, he could see their postures, which betrayed their confusion. He tried a different word. Credits, he said. The confusion continued in all but one of them.
Oh my god, he's demanding money for the hostage. They have no idea what's going on.
Yelling something in his Xenos tongue that was probably analogous to, "He's distracting us." The clone snapped around and fired his rifle, catching one of the Cadians in the chest and throwing him back.
But
the Imperial who came in behind the first opened fire with a shotgun, blowing two of the clones away, the one who had fired and the one beside him, before the other Imperials stormed in. The clones turned to meet the attack, but the distraction coupled with how terribly unwieldy their larger guns were in close quarters left them nearly helpless as the Cadians tore into the clone troopers with mid and close-range weaponry.
Oh my god.
1313 pulled the trigger of his gun, mercilessly killing the clone he had captured and rolling the dead weight off of his body before rising. The captain approached, executing two more wounded clones as he did, face flushed, eyes blazing. You're lucky that little maneuver didn't kill you, crazy.
He's a Krieger, what do you expect?
Plank. He slapped 1313's helmet and then turned, pointing at his Cadians. Jackna, patch up Ithric. Gregor, ready flares. The captain ordered, walking to...
Sorry, I find this hilarious that he's trying to talk a Krieger. He's saying, yeah, you're lucky you survived. And the guy's just going in the background of his head probably... What? Sorry, it's the Krieg thing. It's just a Krieger who survives is hilarious. I've mentioned this before, and just seeing all of this and how they react to him without really getting Krieg. I guess it didn't filter down this far, but just this is funny to me.
To the large square power cell which fed the repeater. The Imperial officer licked his lips, nervous about even touching machines of any kind, but he ultimately determined Xenos technology deserved less reverence than something born of the machine god's will, and pulled the cable feeding the blaster free. He then carefully set the skull down on top of the crate-shaped power cell.
Oh?
The little grappler claws protruding from the bottom of the servo skull clanked and wiggled, pulling it up and enabling it to shamble closer to the now vacant output port. 1313 watched as a single mechadendrite slid out of the base of the skull and fumbled about around the port until it succeeded in blindly feeling it out. It inserted itself, and the whole skull went rigid.
Is it going to work?
The thing then spun, holding itself upside down as another protrusion emerged from beneath and behind its grinning teeth. A long rod, which unfolded to nearly 2 hand spans high before bending near the end and unfurling a radar-like dish. While that went on, Gregor, a large...
Sorry, normally servo skulls are just floating around, you ignore them. The fact that they're going into so much detail right now, the fan is showing how they're literally incredibly complex and have all these, I guess, specialized attachments that just come out and function when they're needed. It's something that just isn't shown. I like hearing about it.
Cadian man with a grenade launcher slung over his shoulder withdrew a flare gun and some green flares. With a nod from the captain, he sent the shining beacons flying over their heads, stepping out from under the half-dome to get the shots off. They blazed like green suns in the darkness and rain, calling more Cadians to their position. Nothing more seemed to happen then, at least to the men within the emplacement. But all across the scattered battles still going on, a shift was starting to occur. Beginning with a nasty surprise to all clones with active comms, which was to say, all of them. A piercing screech soon filled their earpieces, disrupting fire, causing hesitation, and forcing some clones to toss off their own helmets.
Oh, I didn't even think about that aspect, that if it's that physically painful to listen to, they're not expecting it, so their first reaction is to get it to stop, which is probably the right one, because it'll blow out the ear. But on the other hand, that's a whole lot of people without armor suddenly. At least in one very specific point. And because of how tied in they are to their communication, that's going to be a much bigger issue. Like in Imperium, communication is Go there. If you don't hear anything else, just keep fighting until you die. I mean, that's kind of a joke, but also at the same time, literally accurate in some cases. Here, though, clones are way too adept, way too technologically savvy for that ever to be the case, and that is now biting them in the ass because someone managed to break communication in a way that actually caused them pain. Feedback. That's kind of brilliant.
The distraction was a boon to Imperials all across the barricades, but more than that was what came after, subtle though it was. Republic forces began to lose their cohesion as communications died abruptly. Individual squads were forced to rely on themselves, when before they had been part of a greater whole. The clones were no strangers to independent thinking,
and they're
but
good
the
at it
sudden
too.
Switch sent them stumbling, and soon many squads had chosen to tactically retreat and regroup, failing
Probably
to
the smart
realize what this would mean for the clones that chose to stay and hold their ground. The result was bloody chaos. Some of the Republic clones tried to take back the emplacement, perhaps having even
not enough of them know
that
about the
source
emplacement
of
being
the
down, other
comm
than
jamming
the
was
flare.
coming from there. But 1313 and the Cadians repelled them each time, and as more minutes passed, more and more forces gathered at their position. Finally, most of the clones seemed to settle on a retreat and regroup strategy, and save for the far sides of the bridge, abandoned their barricades, sabotaging the weapons they left behind as they did.
So this is just still going on the bridges itself. Although, by the sound of it, the bridges are constant throughout most of the planet, so that's not really saying much. I kind of wish I knew just how big these are in scale sizes. Like, if maybe there was a commission of what this looked like, because I kind of want to, like, is this huge, like the size of a city-sized bridge? It seems large, like the largest interstate you can imagine, just to get all of the tanks down it that the Imperium has, but I just wish we had a comparison scale. More personal and desired than anything else.
This lull in the fighting afforded the scant survivors of the Imperium time to gather and prepare for the counter-assault the clones would inevitably throw back against them. The majority of the Death Corps and Cadian shock troops quickly gathered around the comm jammer following the flares. The remaining tech priests roamed and roved around the emplacement site like busy insects, using monomolecular blades and plasma torches to cut away chunks of the barricades, ferrying them from the first line and re-cementing them in new defensive positions meant to repel invaders from the opposite direction.
Yep.
Heavy weapons were recovered from the dead, while the wounded were gathered and placed within cover for medics and tech priests to examine and tend. 1313 found himself sitting on a log within the new ring of rapidly forming defenses, his silvered pistol holstered, approaching bar clutched tightly in his one hand. Around him sat the Cadians. He had sought to rejoin the others of his corps,
Are there any?
but the soldiers in green had been insistent, and 1313 had found himself too withdrawn and far too exhausted to deny them. They sat in a rough circle around a plasma burner, which provided them with just enough warmth to negate the utter cold of the still falling rain. Above them, the battle in the sky raged on, moving closer, and then farther, and then closer again, fire and lightning descending from the sky with near equal regularity. A Republic gunship fell, spinning from above, firing wildly before crashing 40 meters away from where they sat. The crash made most...
Sorry, this is one of those scenes that I absolutely want to highlight because it's doing something that is technically part of battle. It's the downtime when you're not firing, but the battle is still going on. They're not in the thick of it anymore, but they're still on the front line. So they're just taking that second to breathe while everything is still literally exploding around them like that gunship. Just like, yeah, it's just right over there, but not even half a football field away because I know meters. No, wait, those are yards. I don't know meters. Never mind. I have no idea how far away that is. Just this, I like that this is something being shown because it's not something you usually see ever. I don't just mean in Star Wars or 40K. I mean in fiction in general. The quiet moment in between bouts of insanity while the insanity is still going on, because unlike most fiction, which tries to keep the momentum going constantly, we'll just switch to someone else whenever these moments happen. I like that Fan is going into this and we're seeing the calm moment of I'm exhausted. Oh, kill me, which may or may not be a joke on the Cadian side. Just this. It's a way to get your breath back from all that has happened prior to this. But at the same time, acknowledging it's still going. Having that part explode shows what's still happening. This is a moment that you just don't see because, frankly, it's easy to lose people at these moments because, at least from a more, let's go with financially successful enterprise, this is something that both books and movies do. They'll move to something else that's big and flashy. Here, they're sticking with it, even if it's just for a few words, even if for a few paragraphs. That's a lot more downtime than most people are willing to give an audience because goldfish memory and attention spans. I mean, if you're here this long, you can probably make the assumption you probably don't. Okay, other people who are not me don't have a goldfish attention span. But, for other people, it makes sense. I do have a goldfish attention span. I'm aware of that. It's an issue. But more importantly, I like this. Because it's showing something that would exist, that makes sense. That they wouldn't be constantly on the move. They would have to take time if they survived, but when they're not ready or able or told where to go yet. Even Krieg would do that. Now, I'm assuming Krieg is getting ready faster, if there's anyone left, and I'm not going to assume that. So, we'll see what happens. Either way, though, dude. Also, I did find out, apparently, I was right about Indricta, the commissar, dying. Kind of disappointed about that. I thought I was just wrong about the previous episode. No, I listened to the audio at the end. Yeah, no, she died. Dang, she was an interesting one, too. A lot of interesting characters.
Most of them flinch, but no one moved or reacted outside of that. So, Krieger, what the hell got into you back there?
The fuck is that
asked
accent?
one of the Cadians, a woman named Jackna. She wore the red spiral of the Medicae, but seemed little different from the rest in all other respects.
I mean, it's Cadian.
Her eyes were a light violet, and her short hair was a burnished orange which stuck out from under her helmet in random, matted tufts.
Yeah.
She had her own protein bar, holding the rectangular ration pack with one hand as she pulled the long plastic pin attached to it with the other. Once the pin was pulled free, the packet inflated to the point that it looked like it might burst before a little hole popped open on the end of the bar, ejecting a line of steam which whistled for a moment before petering out.
Did she just do an auto-cook system? I gotta listen to this again. This is actually curious.
Inflated to the point that it looked like it might burst before a little hole popped open on the end of the bar, ejecting a line of steam which whistled for a moment before petering out. She then peeled the pack open, revealing the gray, puffy substance of the ration, consuming it eagerly. 1313 simply shrugged in response, face still hidden.
Huh. Self-cooking rations. I mean, sure, they've been described as gray, let's go with food. It's the Imperium. That is an assumption that I'm probably wrong to make, but I'm just going to go with it. I like that. Also, the background music changing almost to have a rustic tone to it. A little bit of, is it a fiddle or a mandolin? My ear isn't good enough to pick that up. This entire episode is, oddly enough, a really good demonstration of technology and how advanced the 40K world is. I mean, when you get to the tech priests and the space marines that can do anything with tech and all the crazy end, you just kind of like, okay, yeah. But here, it's just the regular rank and file and all the little things they're doing right now. Just the tech priest going around and just having great command there. When you have just the self-inflating meal that cooks itself, just little things like this are technologically advanced in a way that you don't really expect outside of Star Trek. Just things that just work unexpectedly. It's such a cool little detail. I have no idea if this is something he pulled from Canon 40K or if this is just a detail fan made up, but either way, it's a great inclusion.
Behind his mask. Oh, come on, you really going to be humble? You charged into a nest of enemy soldiers with so much confidence they didn't even know you didn't belong there before you got a hold of one of them. Said another man,
that's Krieg.
Julian. This man was enormous, far larger than everyone barring Gregor, who was just smaller. His head and face were clean-shaven, revealing a motley of scars and burns, as well as his cybernetic eye.
Oh.
The man was on his third ration bar. 1313 nodded but added nothing else, making the man's face fall flat. How about we get his name before we try prying into how he thinks? Asked another woman in the group, a round-faced Cadian with long black hair. She cradled a long-shot lass, even as she ate, though she had loosened her flak armor for comfort and tossed off her helmet, allowing the rain to fall directly onto her. Her name was Emiliana, ranked corporal. So, what's your name? I'm sure they give you a name in the Corps.
Numbers,
She
technically.
asked, polishing off the rest of her own ration bar. 1313 nodded, but did not say anything else right away. A harsh laugh followed that, coming from Gregor, who sat opposite the Krieger. The man was thicker than he was tall, and it was all muscle. His brown hair was cut short, completely shaved on the sides and flat on the top. He smiled an unpleasant, unamused smile. Don't bother with him, Emiliana. Kriegers don't like to talk or fraternize with non-Kriegers. They think we're
accurate?
lacking in faith or conviction because we don't die as often as they do.
To be fair, you don't do nearly as much dumb shit as they do. No one does. Literally no one does. It's absolutely batshit insane.
He
Part of the reason
said
they're
with a
cool.
sneer. Emiliana frowned at that, looking first at Gregor and then at 1313. Is that true? Do you really believe that? She asked him. He paused before answering,
Although a
as
lot
if
of it-
considering.
I think a lot of the explanation, at least in canon, is that it's not so much that they don't want to, it's that they're always kind of like, huh, why aren't you charging? We got people. They've got enemies in the way. And it kind of gets really fucking annoying really fucking fast. And it causes issues where they start trying to beat the fuck out of each other and kill each other because personality conflict taken to literally suicidal Krieg levels. Because Krieg. Yeah. Granted, it would be really funny if there was a talkative Krieg. He'd probably make it worse.
The question. This was probably the longest he had ever spent interacting with people who were not from his homeworld.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was also one of the chattiest interactions he had ever been party to. But being chatty didn't make one unfaithful or speak to their conviction. And obviously, it only made sense that there would be faithful beyond the boundaries of Krieg. After all,
That's a
Krieg had
very
sinned, and
surprisingly
they
open way to
had
look at
not.
something.
But more than anything else, he reflected on what he had seen and experienced in their company. No, he said, adding no more. Jackna smiled and raised her eyebrows, and Horston, one of the men wielding a flamer, chuckled into his hands as he crouched over his bar, eating silently as the conversation went on around him. Well, see that? Emiliana said brightly. We must not be so bad. Gregor rolled his eyes, but did not contradict her and went back to his food. 1313 looked back down at his bar and then heard the woman next to him chuckle. Looking over, he almost leaned back and away as Emiliana leaned in towards him, coming close as she reached for the ration bar in his hand. Here, let me, she said, taking the plastic pin and yanking it for him. The packet heated and inflated in his hand, but she did not pull away.
At first, I thought she was cooking off a grenade in her hand the first time this was described. You know what? It probably actually was an internal cooking grenade that they just turned into food because someone got an STC and decided to fuck with it. That's actually how things work in 40K. I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually how it happens. If Fan actually goes with that or not. I mean, there's really no reason that would ever come up because I'd have to go back to the Forge world and get someone to talk about that aspect. It would never be able to come up in writing, but it's such a cool little detail.
Still so very close to him, so close he could almost smell her through the rain and rebreathe her.
He's also 15.
Balancing her rifle in her lap, she reached her arms around his head and undid the lowest of the buckles which secured his mask. 1313 sat like a statue, feeling an odd, human sensation flush through him. His stomach tightened, his face felt hot, but he did not move an inch, trained to hold fast in the face of anything resembling fear. She pulled up on his mask and...
This is one of the 2 times Fan has gone into 1313's perspective to describe fear, or even close to fear. The other time was literally charging the clones at the beginning when he was running to get there first, and they were literally trying to kill him, and he was hit. Oh, there was also the elation being Krieg and like dying for the Emperor. The other time is literally a woman being nice to you. Oh, it's funny because this is very human, and I would have acted the same way at 15. Or now. Or ever. Yeah, let's ignore that part.
he almost dropped his heating protein bar to stop her, but she seemed to notice and shushed him, only pushing the mask up far enough for his mouth to be exposed. There. she said, drawing away,
If the mask is
taking
only
her
up far
rifle
enough, the
back
mask
into
will be
her
exposed.
hands.
What did that mean? He can't
He
see?
gave her a hesitant nod, almost flinching when the packet in his hands popped and began venting steam, his head snapping round to eye it.
What?
Jackna grinned and Julian laughed, while Gregor spat to the side like he had just tasted something bad.
I mean,
Careful,
rations.
Corporal, said Julian. Kriegers ain't trained to handle that kind of battle.
Nope.
Upon hearing that, 1313 felt a true blush color his face for the first time in years, and he brought the bar up to his mouth, tearing the packaging away with his teeth and spitting it
Dangerous
before starting to
Cadians.
eat. Emiliana smiled wickedly at her comrade and shrugged. I have no idea whatsoever what you could possibly mean. Look sharp, said the squad's sergeant. He had been away at a meeting with other members of the command staff, and now came back into the circle unexpectedly, geared and
happened?
standing as if ready for battle.
I mean,
No one needed to hear or see any more to get ready, tightening armor, checking weapons, and standing all at once. They coming back already? Asked
they're
Gregor.
probably moving forward.
Yeah, and with a hell of a lot of friends.
Oh, I actually got a friend
said
already.
the sergeant, a squat, thickly built man named Vetnex, though called Vet for short. Vet tossed Gregor a pair of binoculars, and the big man wasted no time in coming to stand on the logs to look over the new barricades and trenches which had been built. The sight made him spit and curse. Emperor's fecking teeth, he said, coming down and handing Emiliana the binoculars. 1313 went to stand beside her, and though she still used the binoculars, she barely needed them at all. Nearly 2/4 of the defending force had survived the retreat, and what was coming back was well over 3 times that number.
Okay, just going to ask the obvious question here. One, where did you find a picture of George Lucas as a stormtrooper? I didn't even know. Like, he gets a lot of these from canon sources. Really cool that they did that. Two, why would you describe it as 2/4? Call it half. I mean, this is like, is that a thing that I'm just not aware of, that people go about 2/4? Like, sorry, this is just the one time I ever dealt with math. It was always go into the simplest fraction possible rather than to exacerbate them to larger numbers. But it just seems like a weird example. This is completely a nitpick on me, because I know for a fact if I had written this in a master's program, I would have been lambasted by, admittedly not actually the professors, but they would have mentioned it. But then by the other people, it's like, ha! Just ragging on you. Because that happened a lot. Not actually that bad in my program, but worse than others. But more importantly, it seems just like an odd word choice. It's not like a character word choice where I've sometimes gone on those, or if it would fit or not fit in personality. It just seems like an odd choice in general. I know I'm nitpicking on this, but he doesn't make a lot of these little word mistakes. It's more just, I think it might apply to a character more here, more there. This is just one of those random times like, just edit that. It's not a huge deal. It honestly doesn't change anything. It doesn't affect the story at all. It's weird because Fan doesn't usually make those kind of mistakes or leave things in that couldn't be simplified. He just doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He's a very competent writer. He just stands out when he does make a mistake.
So massive a force that they were plainly visible as an indistinct horde of white, even through the distant rain and
That's creepy as
flashing
hell,
of
though.
lightning. What's the plan,
Ghost in
Sergeant?
the rain.
Asked Emiliana, eyes transfixed as she watched.
There is no way for us to kill that many replicae. Even
Sure
though
there is.
They outnumber us
Shoot
10
'em.
to 1.
Said Jackna. We're pulling back across the bridge. There's
Blow
no
it.
point in just dying here,
Yeah.
said Gregor.
I mean, they do technically have the repeater. They could start shooting at range, although I don't think Star Wars bullets do range really well. I'm not sure.
Aw, come on. We can hold them until more guys arrive, said Julian, punching Gregor's shoulder. All of you quiet down, snapped the sergeant. We have been conferring with the Death Corps, and they have let us in on the larger strategy. Major Lazarus is leading the rest of his forces through the connecting passageways that the clones have been using to retreat. He plans to come up behind their lines, kill their crews, and destroy their artillery.
Oh, so they're putting him into a pincer through that. Ooh, fancy. Also, okay, yeah, no, more Krieg survived. Good to know.
But for that to work, he needs an Emperor damn distraction, concluded Gregor.
Yep.
The sergeant nodded. It ain't a glamorous job, but it's our job. Once we see his
Oh,
signal,
they are all
we can
dead,
begin
aren't they?
retreating back across the bridge.
God damn you, fan. Did you literally give us this calm moment just to give us that interaction of all the people and point out, even have the cute little moment of him freaking out because a woman's nice to him? All that just to like, they're all gonna die horribly now. You son of a bitch. I haven't even watched them die and I'm certain you're about to kill them. You, ooh, should hit my mic. Shouldn't do that. Just, God, it's not just a death flag. This is a freaking Imperial Standard Regiment banner being flown around going, hey, there's a target on me, hit me. You son of a...
But until that happens, we have to not only hold, but fight hard enough that all they can see is us. You lot got that? The Cadians snapped to salute at the words. Sir, yes, sir, they said together. All right, then get ready. 5 minutes. Take care of what you can, then meet right here to find out where you are going. Eat if you can, shit if you can't, but don't be late. Go get on with it, said Vet before going back the way he had come. 1313 watched on, and when the speaking was done, turned back to see the sluggish tide of white moving towards them. He wondered briefly if they were taking their time because they were confident in victory, or because their comms being down truly slowed them by that much. He didn't break his gaze as Emiliana began to speak from beside him. How many of them do you think are out there? She asked. He shrugged his shoulders, but then, after a moment, added something. 1,313, he said.
What?
Huh? She asked, turning to look at him. My name, he clarified, is 1,313. She nodded slowly, but smiled after a moment. All right, 13. Until this battle is done, you are part of my squad. Do you have a problem with that? She asked.
Oh, is she the sergeant?
He didn't respond right away, looking at the other men of the Death Corps, most of whom were digging or expanding the trenches, something he could not exactly aid in with his one arm. His brothers would tolerate him, but he was a cripple, and they would treat him as such. Perhaps it was an echo of his human origin, preserved even through the Vitae womb which birthed him. Perhaps it was merely his tired, drugged mind choosing the path of least resistance.
I mean, to be fair, that's also a pretty human origin right there.
Perhaps it was just the weakness of a 15-year-old boy. But 13 did not deny her. He merely shrugged. She slapped his right shoulder, beaming as he flinched from the blow.
Oh, wait, we had a sergeant already come back. He was the one with the monocle eye. Weird that she's saying he's part of her squad. Guess maybe she's the unofficial second?
The blaster burned there, sending a jolt of agony through him.
Yeah, he did.
All right, then load up and eat what you can while you can. I'll let the others know you are sticking around for the
Well, he's
fight.
definitely awake now.
He looked at her and nodded, watching as she left to tell the others about his inclusion. 13 didn't know how he felt about the decision he had just made. But as his eyes moved back to the mass of white-clad soldiers coming over the barren hills, he began to doubt that it would matter. Dying among the Corps, or dying among the Cadians, it made little difference.
I mean, they're close enough that they'll probably all die together. Although, it would be kind of cool depending how this turns out.
Death would be inevitable. Death was his destiny. Unless, of course, the God Emperor chose otherwise.
I don't think Fan will do this. Not in the slightest point. But it'd be hilarious if he turned out to be a perpetual. Will he? No. That almost never happens, and I don't know if that is something that could happen to an artificial being like a Krieger, as fans interpreting them. But it would be funny if he literally just comes back and goes, fuck. Would it happen? No. I have absolutely no expectation, but I would laugh. It would be stupid, and I'd be the only person laughing, but I would laugh. Okay, I don't know how this happened, but 1313 just became my favorite character. He has the most wholesome and funny moments in this entire story, and god damn, the problem is if Fan keeps writing this, I'm going to be tempted to get Kriegers because this is kind of inspiring, and I don't want to get into Krieg. No one should want to get into Krieg because it takes the amount of money you take to play any army in 40K and goes, hold my all the alcohol. Oh, why? But it's fun and it's wholesome and we know we're going to get our hearts ripped out because, like I said, that death flag is a waving. But it's done well, and with a character you wouldn't expect to ever have anything like that. And because it's surprising, it makes it more poignant. And this is good writing. It's good to show how to write a very sympathetic character who has a non-standard mentality. And while we can see all the thoughts going in his head, and even that he's actually really damn smart because he could figure out how many clones were even out there just with a glance and little thought, this entire episode has demonstrated the insanity and the competence of some admittedly amazing people, and how tech savvy they are, how advanced general tech level is, how incredibly advanced specialized tech with the Magos was. All of this is a great example. And frankly, if you just cut this entire story down just to 1313, and just told his story, that would be a perfectly competent example of what a good central character focused narrative looks like, because this has all the hallmark to make characters that fan is inventing feel real. Not just the verisimilitude, but to make it seem real and to seem interesting. Having those small moments where they interact, not going into huge blown out, this is what they look like in 1,000 details, but just here's what they did, here's what they're doing, and a small little smile acknowledging what they did in someone else's respect without saying that they understood and I understood and this is what they're thinking. Without showing too much, they show us enough. And then seeing how other people react tells us what we're supposed to draw from that. That was why the entire scene of her adjusting his mask was funny. Or his mask was funny and fun and just really heartwarming, because she knew what was going on based on how she reacted to other people calling her out on it. She was basically teasing him. And he was very weak to it. And because they kept talking about it and making it part of the conversation, instead of just saying, oh, she was doing this to tease him, Fan didn't fall into the trap of over-explaining a scene and then telling the scene and then explaining the scene and then re-explaining the scene, which is something so many people, I'm not just talking fan fiction authors, I'm talking anyone falls into, that seeing this done well, I feel like a broken record saying this, but Fan is showing a lot of techniques, a lot of stylistic choices right, that so many people who make way more money than anyone who would ever watch this or Fan or any of us combined will ever see in their life. There are incredibly competent, accomplished authors who fuck this up. So yeah, I'm impressed. Basically what I'm saying is you should have already subscribed to his channel. I got the link below to the video. Hit him up if you haven't already. I know I did because I actually double checked it because I forget sometimes. And yeah, just go check out his stuff. There's the link. Do that. And when you're done, if you like this, subscribe. And I'll be back next week whenever shit happens, because my schedule is weird. I just do this. I enjoy doing it. I'm not going to stop because it's fun and this is really good writing. And I'll see you guys the next time. Adios.